Well, welcome to the Auckland Business Chamber's weekly Business Insights webinar. As you know, these are very popular, they're weekly, and we always get people with great insight around certain things in business. Today, I'm really delighted to have with us a couple of gentlemen from Thornton, New Zealand, Hamish Bowen and Raj Tiwari. Hamish is a partner and the consulting team head at Thornton, and he's been in the security practice, which he started since 2010. Raj is also a partner and security team lead at Grant Thornton, and he joined in 2014. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thanks very much.
And obviously, we'll be talking security or cyber security. I mean, this is an issue which, I think we know is growing in importance for business, and it's one of those things. Whilst it's not always right at the top of the list of business issues, it kind of in a way should be, because you may not be interested in it, but it's interested in you, I suppose. So yeah, we'd really love to hear your insights, get a sense of what you do and some of the issues around cybersecurity for business. So as I say, welcome, and we look forward to hearing from you, and I'll follow up at the end with hopefully some really hard questions for you.
Okay, thanks, Simon. I suppose we've got a presentation which we were going to walk through a little bit, just in terms of the stats, the trends, and everything else, but probably wanted to provide a little bit more insight and context that's useful in relation to New Zealand. Really, it's I think it's always easy to say it's big, it's scary, and a lot of things are happening, and it's true, but it's kind of, what's relevant to New Zealand, and particularly New Zealand smaller businesses, which is probably where we're sort of aiming. I guess just in terms of, I'll let Raj just talk through some of the general stats and kind of what we see.
Yeah. Thanks, Hamish. So Simon, the approach we're taking for this discussion is we thought we'll give you a bit of a global flavor, and then we'll, drill down into sort of local New Zealand landscape and, what we're seeing there, and also talk through some case studies that we've been involved in as part of the cybersecurity journey so far as well. So just from global perspective, the cybercrime cost, we expect, or, based on the stats projection, it's going up to be around close to 24 trillion by 2027, which is, when you put that number against, that 8.4 trillion in 2022, it's a quite big jump, right? So as you can see, the numbers and the costs are growing exponentially. The vast majority of the attacks tend to target financial sector for obvious reasons. That's where the money is, obviously. And, just looking at data from Dataport, the average account takeover cost is costing a consumer around $290 in fees. And, when the system goes down, it takes about 15 hours to resolve, right? So quite stark. In terms of time and effort, that cost again adds up. Just in terms of the cybercrime as a service in the dark web is growing rapidly at the moment. And, you can buy tools and techniques for as less as $10 US. And, you don't need to be an expert. You just need to buy the tool and be able to run it, right? It comes with instructions, and there you have it, right? Anyone can be a hacker. And also, based on some of the payment card industry data security standards work we do, which is the PCI DSS, which basically means, if you are a merchant storing, processing, or transmitting any credit card information, you have to sort of comply with that PCI compliance bit. That's mandated by major credit card companies around the world. And based on the information we've seen, 70% of credit card data breaches, they happen through third-party supplier or vendors. And especially the sort of businesses that are members with the chambers would fall under that small and medium-sized businesses who probably engage a number of managed service providers to help with IT and those sort of things. So we're seeing a large increase in breaches coming from those third-party suppliers that are impacting small and medium businesses as well.
Yeah, so that would be things like your web hosting, your backup, your IT support, all that sort of stuff, which as Raj says, it's, New Zealand companies largely don't have the size or scale to have their own in-house team or capability, and so they outsource it. But what MasterCard was saying was they're seeing most of the breaches have been occurred through those third parties. It's kind of
Yeah.
Mm.
And we expect these numbers to continue to go up exponentially.
I suppose in the context of New Zealand, this is really just providing where most of the attacks are happening. This is through the NZ CERT information and things like that. Most of them are really related to phishing scams and credential harvesting, sort of unauthorized access. That's where their predominantly attack vectors are for New Zealand. So social engineering, phishing attacks, where they're deploying malware, that sort of stuff. And some pretty sophisticated, the attacks are getting more and more sophisticated. I know of, a law firm where the CEO was used to, used his kids' schools, saying your school fees are late, everything else, and they kind of clicked on, deployed malware, and then they kind of ended up compromising the whole environment just through that. Just a little bit of social stalking, finding out who he was, what he was about, using those sort of credentials. Raj, you could probably put a bit more colour on this slide.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, as New Zealanders, we've been experiencing over the last couple of years, those text messages that we get, right? Basically saying your NZTA toll is due with the link. So, some of that is what Hamish is referring to as well. And, easy prey, they often target elderlies because they always like to pay their bills on time. They don't want to be late with anything. So they are often the ones who like to click on those links as well, right? And they fall easy prey, to turn into victims. So it's increasing quite a bit. There are help available with CERT, obviously. But just in terms of this quarterly report that CERT puts out, it sort of puts in perspective what's been reported, right? You can imagine these are probably not the real numbers. Often there is shame involved in this, embarrassment, and due to that, businesses and individuals do not report everything that happens. And you just don't know what you don't know. But we estimate that number to be quite higher, the stats up here. But this generally comes out on a quarterly basis by CERT, and it just depends on, again, what's been reported to them, right? Just in terms of types of scams and fraud that are increasing in New Zealand, that number from the 2023 the last quarter, 15.7 million. So most of that money went to investment scams. You can see that 4.6 million went to investment scam, 3.1 million went to scams involving unauthorized money transfers, 2.5 million went to scams involving new job or business opportunity offers. And again, the famous and favorite one, right? Cryptocurrency scams. So 2.3 million went to that. Obviously, with the rise in crypto, more and more people want a piece of it, Bitcoin, whatever they may be. So they're looking for opportunity to make quick buck. So they fall, again, an easy prey to this sort of scams. So yeah, I mean, romance scams is another one that's gaining popularity. We're often hearing these days, banks are often getting dragged into those sort of scams at the moment. There is no clear accountability on who is really responsible or liable when hundreds of thousands of dollars go overseas as part of the romance scam. There are potential lawsuits happening, but again, it's growing as well.
Yeah, and just playing on that unauthorized money transfers, that's where a lot of small businesses get caught out. Really got to have good validation methods around when you make a payment, why you're making the payment, why you're not. We had a client who was, their supplier, well, it was supposedly from their supplier, but it was their email system had been compromised, and told them that, hey, look, we've been hacked. Please make your money transfers to this number. It was kind of seemed very real, and they managed the messages between the supplier, CFO, and themselves. They kind of got away with 200,000 in that case. So all of those sort of things. Be very skeptical when it comes to doing anything with money transfers and changing the way you're paying your money.
Yeah, and small and medium businesses, I guess, are easy targets because you are sort of like in that space of either invoicing or being invoiced, and you want to make sure those bills clear and you get your receivables on time. So you're constantly sort of, that's more of a routine to you as opposed to a control or a check. So oftentimes you are sort of like wanting to pay your bills or, get money in. Hence another reason why you are an easy target as well, right? So this is just some stats from the US, but it just puts things in perspective, right? So 46% of all cyber breaches, they impact businesses with fewer than 1,000 employees, of which 61% of small and medium businesses were the target of just one cyber attack. And this number is obviously just from 2021, but we did it, and it's probably gone up now. 18% malware was the most common type of cyber attack. 82% of ransomware attacks in 2022 were against companies with, again, less than 1,000 employees, which fit into that sort of like small, medium size organizations. And 37% of companies were hit by ransomware had really, fewer than 100 employees, right? So these sort of things are happening more and more, and it will continue to grow. And again, small and medium businesses sort of tend to be the target for some of these bad guys out there.
I suppose we just wanted to talk through a couple of case studies. Some, few of them we've been involved in, but I'll kind of let Raj talk to the first one.
So this one, we probably all heard of it, Latitude financial breach. A lot of your members probably finance through them, may finance through them. This was a hack that actually happened due to weakness in Latitude's third-party service provider, DXC. And what this meant was basically 14 million people were affected, 7.9 million Australian and New Zealanders' driver license were compromised, 53,000 passport numbers. And these were information that were collected as part of gaining that finance or loan. So these were all compromised as part of the attack, and impacted individuals, impacted businesses such as JB Hi-Fi, Harvey Norman. I think the good guys, they no longer exist, but not because of the hack, but it impacted individuals, organizations that pretty much took any loan, any finance through Latitude at the time. And there is still talks about a class action suit being proposed as part of this. And it's basically not just the information, personal information, but it's any other data you have, which in dark web, you can sell it for pretty good chunk of money to create fake identities. It's all out there. And what this meant was then, for the likes of CFOs and CEOs and COOs to sort of like front up the public and basically apologize for what happened and take responsibility, and then share more and communicate more around what is it that they were doing to make sure that information was the leak was being contained at the time, right?
I think the other thing too that's important here is that the privacy requirements have changed since 2020 with the Privacy Act, and so your obligations to notify your customers and everything is required now. It wasn't in place before then, so there's another burden to think about if you start losing personally identifiable information, which is the case of Lateral did in this one. Oops, did you want me to?
Yeah, so this is the service provider, DXC. That was obviously a managed service provider for Lateral, so they had to put out a public statement. Again, it comes with a bit of a reputational damage as well, especially when you're a supplier. You're in the business of having a number of customers providing them support, and something like this can seriously damage not just your reputation, but overall your operations as well.
This one here was a company we were involved in helping them restore through. It was a ransomware attack. And then just to give a sense how attacks can often, the least expecting ways to get through. So it was one of their team had a browser. He was searching websites with it. They had insecure settings on the browser, which allowed it to get malware in it. They then use that malware to sort of play with his PC and make it malfunction a little bit. And so, he calls the help desk. The help desk was a sort of a third party that remotes in. They capture the credentials of the admin through the help desk remoting in. They then sort of sat on the system for around 6 months, figuring out what the network looked like, where everything was, where the backups were. So they made sure they could turn off and kill the backups. without them sort of knowing that that was going on. They then deployed the ransomware on the weekend. I remember I was out with my son's cricket when I got a call. We've been compromised. How do I help? And so that sort of came. And in the end of the day, the only method they had to get back was some physical backups they'd had, which they'd luckily retained. But this really resulted in a pretty slow recovery procedure. They had pretty ineffective recovery strategies in place, and they kind of hadn't really thought about it that well. So, it took them quite a few months to get back up on their feet and become effective again. Just small business, just an example. Lucky it could carry on trading through it, but pretty impactful to the business.
Just one thing I wanted to highlight there was, as you can see, right, back in the day, the bad guys wanted to come in quick, make quick buck and get out. But now they have a lot of patience, right? They like to come in and watch and see what all your valuable information goes, what your backups are, so that they can lock up everything and, get the best bang for their buck. So that's probably something that's changed quite a bit from the early days.
Yeah.
So this was another one where we encountered card scheming, where basically a POS terminal, the machine itself was swapped. So, basically when anyone would go in and use this terminal to get cash, your numbers were being basically skimmed and the cards were being skimmed.
Yeah, so they deployed this during COVID too, right? So it was during lockdown. So
That's right. Yeah.
go in there when there's limited traffic and everything else. And we discovered it through an inspection, part of our reviews, that they'd actually had this skimmer in place.
Yeah.
The next topic we just sort of said, AI is obviously a big topic everyone's talking about. I suppose we just wanted to give context about what will that mean for security attacks and things like that, just to give context about it. The reality, the first step is going to be, greater sophistication. There's going to be a lot more engineering of the attacks. As we said below, you can take snippets of people's voices and kind of create a conversation with it, right? So you can, and there's at the moment there's a classic text scam was, Mum, I've lost my phone. Can you please send me some money? I need a cash, da da da. The next step is they'll get your kid's voice and sort of replicate that through to a call, which becomes harder and harder to determine, is that a real distress or not. So the images and everything else. Was also the example, I think, Raj, you were talking about the one in the US with that team.
No, that was the one in Hong Kong where it was literally a deep fake sort of videos. Someone pretending to be the CFO authorizing transfer of millions of dollars. When the message initially came, the employee didn't believe it, so he wanted to have a meeting. So he had a meeting, and there were a number of people in there, and the only real person was the employee who was actually transferring the amount. And on screen he had the CFO, who basically was created through deep fake imaging, and all he heard was his CFO in front of other staff members authorizing the transfer, and he transferred it. So these sort of things are happening more and more. And with the rise of AI, as Hamish said, anyone can get into it, right? You don't need any technical knowledge, or you don't have to be an expert in this area anymore, right? So AI is obviously enabling some of this, which makes it easier for more people to be on the bad guy side than to be the good guys.
Yeah, I think if you sort of ask ChatGPT to create an attack for you, it'll say this isn't authorized. But if you ask it in a different way, it'll figure out how you should do that attack. It's just the way you phrase your questions. So there's guide rails, but probably not ones that are going to prevent people from doing what they want to do.
Yeah.
Oh, these are.
Yeah, these are just some deepfake images. It blurs that line of what's real and what's fake. So it's easy to get into this now.
Yeah. The Pope.
Yeah. And again, this sort of thing, in the already polarizing world, it creates more polarization, right? People try to claim the fake videos are real. Even the courts are getting into it now. It's getting harder for them to figure out, what's real, what's fake. And again, taking images and, using it for porn sites or anything else, that's becoming common in common.
I suppose we want to sort of give some practical advice to some of the people in the chamber, and that one of the first things we'd say is consider your supplier risk, right? New Zealand companies rely heavily on a lot of third parties and suppliers and everything else, and sort of saying, can you make sure, how do you know that they're doing it well, have the right capability, have the right skills and everything else? And I think unfortunately, New Zealand, we've only got to the sort of status of really what I call contractual risk management, where we kind of, we'll get a lawyer to set up a good contract with the supplier and everything else and make them applicable for it. But, there's no active monitoring or understanding and saying, are these guys living to what they're supposed to do? Are they capable of doing it? That sort of stuff. So we've sort of been working with a couple of automated tools to do sort of ongoing assessments around third parties, which become a lot more viable and real, to say you can really keep a tab on those people you're relying on in your supply chain. Considering assessing your security environment for risk, in terms of what's the profile of what you deal with, where are your obvious likely attack points and vectors and everything else. Just even have a think about it in terms of what your, obviously anything to do with money is going to be at high risk. That's always a high attack point. But, anything personally identifiable information, anything that will cause reputational damage, those sort of things are now kind of in scope for you. So anything, medical records, personal identifiable stuff, all kind of makes it really painful for you to manage. You're the custodian of it. And I think what we're sort of saying to a lot of people is, if you don't need to keep that information, don't keep it, right? Get it out of your environment. Similarly, it's going to become, personally identifiable information is going to become a bit like credit card information is now, right? If you don't need it, don't get it in, keep it in your environment, because it just creates you more of a target than anything else.
Yeah.
You want to talk to the next couple?
Yeah, and then consider your recovery options just in case if things go wrong, right? Do you have meaningful backups? Don't just rely on the cloud. Recently we read that Google Cloud by mistake deleted their client information, right? So those sort of things do happen, but just making sure you've got your ducks in a row, just in case if things go wrong. As a small medium business, you can still get your business, continue your business, continue moving in the right direction if things happen while you're focusing on the recovery side of things.
Yeah, and even protecting your, I gave the case study, the company that got a ransomware attack. If we put protective mechanisms around who can change the backups and get access to them, really secure those, because they are your prime recovery method in a lot of these attacks. Right? I suppose the last bit was, don't confuse IT skills with security skills. Often another mistake, right? He knows a bit about IT. He's the guy who can help us, right? It's a different mindset, different skill set, and not be the same. Often the easiest way to get something running and working is to open it up from a networking perspective, rather than to keep it secure.
Yeah, and one other thing small, medium businesses can do is just do some high-level maturity assessment around your security environment, and just look at some of the gaps that may exist, especially if you're dealing with third-party suppliers. That will then give you a bit of a framework to focus on where to invest, things you need to really clamp down on, close down on to keep yourself secure. Right.
Yeah, and I like the last one was sort of saying get the correct licensing. A lot of people get the cheaper Microsoft licensing and everything else. These limitations on how much that's secure and everything else. Have endpoint solutions which are on your laptop, which kind of deal with, that's where the attacks are and that's where they'll be noticed and everything else. So there's a lot of really good endpoint solutions out there. Those give you a lot of protection, bang for the buck, appropriate licensing and good endpoint protection.
Yeah.
And finally, here's just some locations of places we'd suggest to consider in terms of, information and just to consider some stuff more. Obviously the New Zealand CERT, there's a National Cyber Centre. They provide a lot of good information and tutorials focused towards organisations and businesses about what they should do. The last one we sort of see, consider cyber insurance. It's what was business interruption insurance is clearly defined. Cyber is outside of scope now for that insurance. It is in the organisations with help and recovery and everything else who've had cyber insurance. It's a great asset to have that ability to kind of, at least have the costs of the recovery kind of covered a little bit. It won't cover everything, that's for sure, but it's certainly a helpful thing to consider.
That's correct.
I think that was it. I'll hand back to you, or maybe I'll stop sharing.
Fantastic. Hey, well, thank you, gentlemen. Yeah, it's a as we've said, a really important area. I think one of the stats you used there, that the US one, one of the US ones, show that actually fundamentally, if you're in business, you will be the target of a cybersecurity fraud. And I think what's also clear from what you're saying is with AI and look, a bunch of other things and the numbers there, it's getting more and more sophisticated, difficult to detect, and more pernicious in terms of its effects. What you've given us a few ideas. I mean, what do you say in sort of a high level summary on what people should do, business people should do to protect themselves? Is it yeah, I mean, is it training, software? What's what would you sort of,
well, I suppose
summary on it?
If I was a top priority, probably training and awareness is the biggest thing, because that is the obvious attack vector right now. It's social engineering, it's phishing attacks, it's making you click on the wrong things, it's doing those sort of things. It's the people are still the easiest attack vector from a technical perspective. So the second priority is kind of a bit of housekeeping, like I said, make sure you've got the appropriate licensing and protections in place just from a technical perspective, which will help. And then backups are, the key recovery thing, and then have a plan about how you're going to prepare for those sort of, in the event, who's going to be involved, how do you inform up, what are you going to do around it, and even just having a walkthrough plan that you can kind of manage it through.
Yeah, no, that's right. I think on the people point, we have relatively recently here at the chamber put in place sort of testing, so you'll get sent these, phishing exercises and so on, and pleasingly the numbers of people clicking on them in our staff has come down, but there's one or two who are slow learners, and I'm not suggesting I'm necessarily one of them, but
we had an exercise with a client that was it was interesting stat. We ran the phishing attack and then did the training and then ran another phishing attack, and unfortunately the numbers didn't improve, which
well, fortunately ours have actually. It's very, very good, but there's still just one or two. And
I think they say the worst candidates are the most senior people who've got the least time, who take the least care when it comes to looking at emails and things like that.
Yeah, it's probably right.
That's correct. I think you can have all sort of tools and technology in place, but if people aren't aware, that's your biggest weakness, right? And it just takes one person to click on a link out of whatever your number of staff you may have, and that's why I think security awareness and training is quite key, as Hamish said.
Yeah, fantastic. And again, I know you probably answered this, but just to sort of come back to it and nail it again. So that's what to do to sort of try and prevent it. What about if it's happened? And I don't know, your computer's flickering and everything's going wrong, and what's your sort of basic advice in those situations?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few things to think through. the first step is often to isolate the problem, right? So that's meaning generally take it offline, right? Don't keep trying to operate, keep connected, things like that. Isolate and segment it down, and therefore, give you a period of disruption to your business. But the first thing to do is don't try to carry on like normal. Stop it, disconnect, isolate where the problems come from, what the likely issues are, and then be able to quantify and have a sort of a walkthrough plan of how you're going to respond to that. And then think about the communication and the other things that are going to go around with it, and just sort of set up a bit of a war room yourselves.
Yeah. And I think one thing that also helps is having an incident response plan if you can. It doesn't have to be too detailed, but as long as it sort of outlines if things go wrong, what to do and who is involved, from yourself, your vendors. If as long as those things are clear, then when time comes, you can mobilize that incident response plan, and you can get the right people into the room to help you and get things moving. And as Hamish said, I think that example we shared around what we were involved with, helping, I think, the vendor at the time that the client was dealing with, they didn't tell them to go offline, right? And that's what caused quite a bit of issues as well, because the bad guys were still in there, and they got more time to do more things, look around and so on. So isolating that problem is key.
Gotcha. And look, for the final question, and I just want to say these guys haven't asked me to ask this, but I mean, I'm genuinely sort of interested. You two have been around all of this for a long time. You've seen it evolve and change and worsen, really, in terms of the numbers and the sophistication, etc. What are businesses typically coming to you for help with? What are the services you're offering? Give us a sense of that.
So the predominant ones initially is really just to give a sense check across where they're at and what they should do, what improvements they should make. It's kind of that initial assess piece, and then create a plan to improve. That's a pretty common one. More and more too, we're getting, which is why we're sort of spending a lot more time around vendors, right? Evaluating your vendors and saying what kind of risk profile do they present? Are they well positioned? Are they in good shape? Those are the sort of ones that people are suddenly getting an increased awareness about. It's one thing to have a good contract, but how do I know they're doing the right things and they're appropriately secure? And so we can do a lot of that pretty quickly, assessments against those third parties.
Yeah.
Which has changed a lot. Sorry, Raj, I was going to cut you off there.
I was just going to say, hopefully it won't get to a stage where things have happened and then you have to come to us. Those things do happen as well. But it's really making sure you understand what your environment looks like. And one other thing that we often find is when dealing with vendors, as Hamish said, organizations just rely on the contracts. And generally in the contracts, there's a lot of stuff in there that basically says you can, for example, you can ask for a right to audit or some sort of report, and, organizations just overlook those sort of things. And they just assume when things go wrong, somebody will come in here and help me. Whereas, that may not be the case. And we've seen that happen as well, right? So it's really understanding what's in the contract. If you've got right to audit clauses, asking, right to ask for reports and so on, are you actually doing it? Is somebody doing it? And if you're getting those reports, is somebody looking at it? Do they understand what they're looking at? And, asking questions of your vendor as well. If you have any doubts in anything you're looking at, getting into that sort of habit definitely helps as well.
Totally right. Hey, well, gentlemen, I appreciate your time. It's been incredibly informative around security and in particular the cyber threats that we're facing. And I'm sure our viewers will have got a lot out of it. So Hamish, Raj, Grant, Thornton, thanks so much.